Now, when it comes to this specific subject matter and musician, it hits a little close to home. Why do I say that? I'm about to explain it fully. Because June 8th, 2020, Notorious Mass Effect podcast was created. I mean, shout out to longevity and consistency, right? Anyways, my fault. I had to pat myself on the back. So June 8th, 2020, Notorious Mass Effect podcast was created. Now, when it comes to the creation of that podcast, of course, I was covering music. Of course, I was covering games. And I was creating, a little modest revenue stream, nothing like it is now, even though if the IRS listening, I'm not making any money. You know what I'm saying? No, all right, so when it comes to that podcast, it had an audience of 6,000 to 8,000, I think, weekly downloads. Not the biggest, but definitely making some waves as far as the continuation of growth on that platform. I was under Spotify, had a phenomenal relationship with Spotify, more specifically the hosting platform Anchor, which I think no longer exists. But for the most part, I was an ambassador for Spotify, being one of the first podcasters ever to put out video content on Spotify because I was granted access. So the Anchor/Spotify ambassador program, I was one of the first podcasters to be implemented into that. So with that being said, the reason why I'm saying all that is because when I was covering music, I was indeed playing music while I was covering it, which, technically is a copyright issue, right? But for a year plus, a lot of the studios was letting me rock, and it was a lot of audience gain off of me covering music while playing it, because it wasn't just playing music. I was covering it, giving my sentiments, giving the overall, I really wasn't doing the chart data back then like I am now, but I basically covering it, giving my subjective opinions about the track, right? Just so happened, Eminem put out this particular album back in 2020 titled Music to Be Murdered By. That came out January 17th, 2020, right? I covered that album, had immense praise for it. I thought it was fantastic. I think Eminem's one of the greatest wordsmiths we ever had in hip hop history. Now, he followed that album up with the deluxe edition, Music to Be Murdered By Deluxe Edition, December 18th, 2020. So in the span of, January 17th to this, I clicked the Eminem show in the world, to December 18th. So from January to December, my review of Music to Be Murdered By was out and fully, making its waves as far as people listening to my review of his album, right? So his deluxe edition came out and I did the same thing. I reviewed the music and ultimately found out that I didn't like it. And not only did I not like it, I critiqued it in the way that I do when I don't enjoy the listening session, right? And ultimately, for the first time ever, all these artists I've covered, Drake, The Weeknd, Kendrick, Taylor Swift, for the first time ever, this particular artist had a copyright takedown notice on me. Now, Music to Be Murdered By, the original, came out in January. And now in December, almost a year later, the same type of music, but the deluxe edition is being targeted for the reason of the takedown notice. So from January to December, they didn't have any issue with it. But now, in December, after my, negative review of the deluxe edition, here comes a takedown notice. We will receive a complaint from Universal Music Group following content infringes their intellectual property rights worldwide, right? And guess who was claimed by? Eminem for the Music to Be Murdered By Deluxe. So here I am thinking, little old me, now at this point, 10 to 12,000 weekly downloads. How in the world are they copyrighting me for something that I've been reviewed and now this is just a deluxe edition of that? It's almost as if somebody from his camp didn't like my opinion on the deluxe edition and now they took certain actions to get my podcast taken down. And that ultimately was the end of that rendition of Notorious Mass. Pour one out for the 2020 version of Notorious Mass. So going back to me being an ambassador, right? I was one of the first people to ever put out video on the Spotify platform. So if you go to Amazon, right, just to, clarify my statements, I ain't just yapping up here. If you go to Amazon and look for a podcast, this podcast is titled Analytic Dreamz, Notorious Mass Effect. The original, the OG version, was just titled Notorious Mass Effect. And basically, if you type in gameplay walkthrough, it will pop up videos from 2020 to 2021, basically showcasing. I was one of the first ever to put out video on that platform. Now, with that being said, because when content takedown notices happen, they take down your podcast because they kept going as far as the legal route, and now they just took down the entire thing. Kind of crazy, but hey, I'm letting you know why it hit so close to home. So now he's taking it down completely, and the only way you can ever see the original version of Notorious Mass Effect is on Amazon, and I believe it's on Apple. I forget what they call their stuff, podcast, whatever. So that happened, and then ultimately the revenue stream I was making was completely cut off. I was all the way back to zero as my entire podcast was taken down. Now, understandably so, as a totality of playing music and covering it, I guess, the music, if they would have told me, I would have stopped. It's not like they told me I didn't stop. It was the first time ever, and that took down my whole podcast. So with that fact being out there and the artist being attached to it, that is why I had so much personal feelings towards this current story I'm about to cover, because I know how him and his team gets down as far as really going throughout the legal route whenever they don't agree with certain sentiments. Now, of course, fast forward to March 2025, get my soundboard. Fast forward to March 2025, more specifically March 30th. We've already gained back that audience, and even more, to the point where now this version of Notorious Mass Effect is bigger than that last one ever was. And with that being said, we've surpassed 10 million downloads, which I'll be getting to soon. But as far as 10 million downloads being surpassed for the podcast, we also have 200,000 plus weekly downloads. It fluctuates from 203 to 205,000 weekly downloads. So just let it be a testament to consistency and determination, even if you have to start back over, because it was from ground zero. Went to a whole new hosting platform and everything. I had to start over, and I was at zero. I had to build it all the way back up. Obviously I had the brand, they recognized me from the past, but still, whole new platform and no telling what the audience was going to look like. And now we're the biggest we've ever been, to the point where people are reaching out and things of that nature and offering certain licensing deals for the Notorious Mass Effect brand. So the reason why I'm saying that is because this person who leaked Eminem's songs is definitely going to go through the fullest extent of the legal system with this Eminem debacle, right? So with my personal story set to the side, I just wanted to showcase why this hit so personal for me as far as the Eminem team and them coming after certain people legally, right? And I would highly suggest you listen to or read Charlamagne's book, Black Privilege, so you don't think I'm just in conspiracy theorist land. Like what Jay-Z did to Charlamagne, artists really take it serious when you have negative critiques, to the point where they may try to get you fired and cut off your way of living, your way of paying bills, and they just don't care, right? So it's not like I'm in conspiracy theory land. Just wanted to let you know that I just went through a whole debacle with the Eminem team back in 2020 to 2021, and it was never thought we was gonna rebound. Well, actually I did, but I didn't think we was gonna bounce back in the way that we did. So that being said, enough of my sob story. Let's get into the actual subject. So Joseph Strange, a former sound engineer at Eminem's studio, is charged with criminal copyright infringement and interstate transportation of stolen goods. Now, this is a little different. This man Strange faces up to 10 years in prison if convicted on both charges. Now, what in the world could Joseph Strange could have done to end up being served with 10 years in prison? Well, I'm glad you asked. So apparently, from 2007 to 2021, only 4 people had access to the protected hard drives that Eminem was making music on. From 2019 to 2020, files were transferred from the secure hard drives to an external hard drive while Strange was employed. Now, as far as Eminem's team, they're very thorough, so they had details to back it up. Doja Cat, a Canadian individual, allegedly paid Strange $50,000 in Bitcoin for around 25 stolen songs. Fans also purchased leaked tracks. One individual from Connecticut paid around $1,000 for a pair of songs, right? So they're basically showing the mischievous nature of Joseph Strange. Now, when it comes to the search, they ran into Strange's home in January 2025 and uncovered 12,000 audio files. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, they caught him in 4K, including Eminem songs. So it wasn't even just, it's only Eminem songs. It was including unreleased Eminem songs, along with handwritten lyrics and a VHS tape with unreleased content. The FBI, they're the ones who ran to his home. They say they traced the purchase of these songs through a fan who initially contacted producer Fred Reck. Ladies and gentlemen, it gets even deeper than that. Now, if Strange is convicted of this because they ran into his home, caught him in 4K, got a lot of evidence, so seemingly he's going to be convicted, but we don't know yet. Your evidence, you're innocent until proven guilty, right? Strange could face up to 15 years in prison. I said 10, right? So it's 15 years of prison, 5 years for copyright infringement, and 10 for interstate transportation. The investigation highlights the importance of protecting intellectual property and the financial losses to creators and collaborators. Now, on my coverage of that story, you're probably wondering, well, whose side are you on? Obviously Eminem's side. Now, of course, if you're leaking unreleased music, that's a crime. But as far as the coverage of music and playing it while you cover it, a plethora of artists do it. So I was thinking, for my personal situation, it was not as serious as Eminem's team was making it out to be. And they only did it when the deluxe version came out, and I covered it in a negative fashion. They never did it when I had the highest of critique for his original music, To Be Murdered By. I wonder why that is. So anyways, this one, I agree with Eminem's team 100%. Just putting in perspective why it hit so close to me, because my entire way of, not entire way, because back then I was like doing other jobs and working with whole collegiate institutions and stuff. But now, you know, if that ever happened, it would be life changing. But back then it was bad, but it wasn't as bad because I'm, you know, still a student at the end of the day. But now it's like, you understand how to go about avoiding these situations. When back then I was, you know, leaving lanes open for artists who was upset with me to get at me in legal ways, right? So Eminem's team praised the FBI Detroit Bureau for its thorough investigation, and they said the leak caused significant damages, which, you know, I would expect that, and to Eminem's artistic legacy, as stated by the spokesperson. So him getting his music leak, I'm completely on Eminem's side as far as him going after Joseph Strange. Obviously, we don't know if he's guilty or not, but, you know, FBI went in there and uncovered a lot of audio files and Eminem songs, and they're basically charging him with criminal copyright infringement and interstate transportation of stolen goods. So 10 to 15 years in prison seems like a hefty sentence just to be on the whim, right? So I think they have some type of evidence and credibility when going at him. But of course, to bring it back to me, I do believe that at some point, I ain't gonna say I need an apology for Eminem, because, you know, we good now. Like 200 to 205,000 weekly downloads, just surpassed 10 million total downloads. You know, like the podcast is in phenomenal health, right? And way bigger than that version was that his team targeted, right? I just believe at some point, you know, Jay-Z and Charlamagne had their differences, but they're pretty good now. Like, they're pretty solid. But, you know, overall, I do believe that my dream of having a podcast was almost taken away. Well, was taken away. I had to build it back from scratch, but it was taken away. And that could have been the end of Notorious Mass Effect if I didn't persevere and have the resilience to just go at it again, but just try to take away every route and revenue, take away every route and possibility of artists being able to come at me via copyright. Because of course, if I was just popular, or if I was just being listened to for playing music, then this podcast wouldn't have nearly been as popular. As you know, I don't play any music. I don't even play that no more. I'm not giving you any reason to take down my content. So that being said, yeah, shout out to everybody who supports Notorious Mass Effect. This just turned into a whole soapbox session, but that's why I wanted to cover this and also give my sentiments, because, you know, I've covered this before when I first started the podcast again on Red Circle. Shout out to them, phenomenal people who work over there. Under Red Circle, I put out Spotify versus Notorious Mass Effect and basically got into the whole playlisting thing and how I was targeted and things of that nature. So I got into the Eminem part of it, but you know how to do it for clickbait. Put the whole conglomerate when really it was just Eminem's team. So shout out to Eminem for taking down my whole podcast. You know what I mean? We bounced back, but, you know, at some point, it's just yeah, I still critique his music fairly, but how would y'all feel? Y'all build something up to like 12, 15,000 weekly downloads, and then it gets completely taken away with all the revenue and things of that nature. Because at this point, it's way bigger than it's ever been before. But even back then, I was a little hurt. So with that being said, as far as this specific story, which I'm on Eminem's side as far as his team going at Joseph Strange, click my link tree in my bio. Let me know on one of my social medias. What do you think about Eminem going at his former sound engineer and the FBI charging him with criminal copyright infringement and interstate transportation of stolen goods?